James Ho runs an online business that aims to revolutionise how people go camping. He describes it as the Airbnb of the outdoors.
How are you, mate?
Good, buddy.
Yeah, good.
James says his business almost didn't survive last year.
I don't think we would have been able to survive without JobKeeper, and so for that we're eternally grateful to the government for that.
The JobKeeper wage subsidy helped the company to retain its 2 existing staff and to make it past those initial lockdowns. But since regional travel reopened, business has boomed. In the July to September period last year, while still receiving JobKeeper, turnover tripled.
It so happened that the pandemic, ironically enough, was actually a great thing for our company.
Data obtained exclusively by 730 reveals at least $1.3 billion in wage subsidies were racked up by employers that tripled their turnover in the quarter they claimed JobKeeper, while at least another $1.3 billion was claimed by companies that doubled their turnover.
$1 billion would buy you a new public hospital in Australia, and yet that's the amount of money that we gave to firms that tripled their earnings.
James says his business has voluntarily repaid all of the JobKeeper it received, more than $50,000 worth.
It was less of an economic decision, frankly, for us, but it was really more in the spirit of what we thought was the intent of the JobKeeper payments.
Temporary and targeted, the new spending measures were not designed to go forever.
JobKeeper began in March last year, and once companies qualified, they could access the $1,500 per employee payment every fortnight until late September. And the turnover test that was initially flagged?
To be eligible, the turnover of the business will need to have fallen by 30% or more.
Was soon relaxed to allow businesses to qualify based on an estimate that their turnover would fall below the thresholds. 730 has obtained analysis produced by the independent Federal Parliamentary Budget Office, which looked at the turnovers of most of the companies that claimed JobKeeper payments. More than half of the payments they examined went to companies where turnover did not fall by the threshold amount, generally 30%, in the quarter they claimed JobKeeper. That's at least $38 billion in JobKeeper that went to companies where turnover did not fall below those thresholds. And of that amount, at least $20 billion went to companies that increased their turnovers.
JobKeeper was a good idea. Of course it saved jobs, but the way in which it was administered has led to some of the biggest waste in the nation's history.
The program was set up based on an anticipated decline in turnover. If we didn't do that, we wouldn't have got the money out the door.
While most companies that thrived did qualify legitimately and can keep their JobKeeper, the ATO is coming after others it believes weren't eligible to start with, including small businessman Tom Tapping, over a debt worth about $30,000.
This is potentially ruining. I have no idea how I'm going to pay it.
Tom live streams community sport using robotic cameras. He says the business was set to broadcast Perth sporting competitions last year before all sport was suddenly cancelled. He applied for JobKeeper for himself and 2 employees and received about 3 months' worth before the ATO demanded its money back.
We applied in absolutely good faith. We were advised by our accountants that they considered we were totally eligible.
Tom only registered the business in January 2020. The tax office says he didn't lodge an activity statement in time to qualify. It even questions whether he had employees or paid them anything. Tom rejects that and says while his paperwork was sloppy, he wasn't trying to rip off taxpayers.
There's no goodwill about what they're doing and the way they're doing it whatsoever. And you do feel very victimised.
The tax office has told 730 it's let slide about $180 million in JobKeeper, wrongly claimed by businesses, but which were honest mistakes. Tom has appealed his decision 4 times without success.
It's pretty galling when you see the stories about millionaires overseas getting more millions from Australian government.
Using Freedom of Information laws, 730's uncovered an email from last June alerting Federal Treasurer Josh Frydenberg that 15% of recipients sampled increased their turnovers in April during the height of lockdowns compared to the previous year. It was more than a month later that the government announced there would be no changes to eligibility criteria for another 2 months until late September. The Federal Treasury Department, which designed JobKeeper, has defended the decision not to include a mechanism to recoup funds. And it argues that just because some companies were up on the previous year, that doesn't mean they weren't struggling.
If it had been designed differently, for example, if it was more tightly targeted or shorter in duration, this would have affected macroeconomic outcomes and the course of the recovery.
The idea was to provide certainty in a time of radical uncertainty. And the way you provide certainty is to make something simple, clear, and not subject to change within a certain time frame.
University of New South Wales economics professor Richard Holden has examined a recent Treasury review into the scheme. He agrees that changes within the first 6 months could have encouraged companies to reduce production to artificially qualify for JobKeeper, slowing the recovery.
In a time of crisis, you can be a little over-inclusive or a little under-inclusive. Being under-inclusive was going to be very damaging, and so they erred on the right side of the line.
I think the analysis that's been done by Treasury is pretty generous to Treasury, as you'd expect when you ask somebody to mark their own homework.
Back at the caravan park, James is looking forward to another busy summer, and he's more certain than ever his company made the right call to return its JobKeeper payments.
If you are a net beneficiary of the pandemic over the last 20 months, but it's the proper thing to do to be able to return those payments to the government and really to the communities that we do serve.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.